Her name is Yutong Wing. She is an Asian American, and she bought some property in California that just happens to have shoreline. And you may be aware of this because CBS and a whole bunch of media is presenting this story to the public. And it egregiously annoys me because as somebody who has family that are tribal, I don't like it when they drag the Indians into something, just trying to throw that Indian card in there when they're literally a bunch of white people are robbing an Asian woman and hiding behind a white man who happens to have a felony record. So I want to talk about this case because I'm particularly annoyed about it, but I also want people to be aware of the actual legal facts in this case that the media has, of course, withdrawn. Hi, my name is Missy, and I like to dig into things that the media is misrepresenting. And you can take it for whatever you want, but I'm going to talk about the actual facts of this case. So there's a beach area that the public, you can see the trails are visible that across these fields of land that lead to the beach. And ordinarily, it is private property, and ordinarily you get to a beach using a road. But because nobody has particularly stopped people from going across this private property, people kind of get the feeling that they have a right to use that land. And it's really concerning when a city literally tries to break the law and claim that there's an actual easement to the public, encouraging the public to trespass on land that they really don't have a right to trespass on. So this is a city, the city of Daly City, has claimed that there is a right-of-way through this land. But if you go and you look at the record, there's not. So I'm going to go into the actual law, but I want to talk about the notary republic, about the sale of this land and some facts that's not being told. So I'm going to tell you what the media is telling you, and then I'm going to show you some things about the actual law regarding the notary republic. So what happened was there was this big, huge chunk of land, and allegedly, according to what was filed in court, there was a bunch of owners. There's 24 lots now. And allegedly, when this land first came apart, there was allegedly, because nobody in the media, not a prosecutor and not the city, no one has showed an actual document that says there's an agreement that none of the land will be sold without all the majorities has to have an agreement to sell. If there is that document, then that could possibly be a legitimate concern that could void all of the parcels that was purchased or allegedly purchased by an Asian woman, and her name is Yutong Win. Sorry. So there's a guy that she's connected with, and they're trying to make it out like this is her boyfriend, and she's publicly saying that this is just a real estate advisor. That's not, they're not like, together. But what bothers me is that they're hiding behind him and they're only presenting him in the media and only showing her like standing there with the camera. She's the one that put the sign up that basically she's the gun owner, and she put a warning sign up, which where I live in Oklahoma, a lot of people put those kinds of sign up. I'm not saying it's right. If you put a sign up and says we don't call 911 and you show a gun, it's a vague statement. But I think her sign was a little bit more direct because somebody had vandalized her property. So she said, for those who cut my fence or robbery trespassers will be shot. It doesn't say killed. It's just basically warning the person, hey, we are armed, and if you come to rob us, because there is a habitat. There is somebody actually living on the land. There's like kind of RV there or something. So they're warning robbers, which technically you can get by with warning robbers because that's just not somebody just trespassing, but kind of mixed in the trespassers with the robbery. But putting the robber word in there kind of sort of protects them. But nonetheless, that there's some charges for making threats with that sign. And, so anyways, but I want to get to how the sale took down, because I think a lot of people in the community that are upset about the fence that they put up as soon as they bought the land, they don't want people going across their property. Now, if they had bought all the land they said they did, then they have every right to sell that land and build on it and whatever. And in the state of California, if you do not have a prescriptive easement or a written deed, you do not have an easement. So technically the city, and now here's the interesting part, the seller, Nagy is his last name, he said that he was trying to wash his hands of this property and he felt like the city was going to come in and do eminent domain at some point, but they hadn't. So the fact that he was talking about them wanting to do eminent domain tells me that he's telling the world that he knows the city doesn't have an actual easement and they don't have an easement, right? So, but this is a document that they came out on January 31st, 2026, saying the city of Daly City is taking action to address an unpermitted fence. Now, unpermitted fence means even if you own private land, you cannot put a fence up in that area because of, views of the ocean. You have to get a permit, right? So because they did not get that permit, was their avenue to be able to just go in and take it down. And so they're saying that it was an unpermitted fence. And it said, this is the important part right here. It says blocked public access and raised safety concerns. It says it was built without required permits and appears, it says it appears, it doesn't say, but we conclude, it's just saying possibly extending into a public right of way. Now this right here is important because what the public is saying it appears, meaning we understand that we don't have a right of way and it's going to be argued in court, but just in case there is an actual right of way, we're going to go ahead and take that fence down in addition to the fact that you didn't even get a permit. But they have a right to continue to remove people from their property. Okay, but here's what's happened. So I'm going to show you about the two notaries. So there was two notaries. This is how it went down. Nagy, who is the owner of, he's got 3 siblings. And so there was 24 parcels. Now I'm going to show you the actual document and then I'm going to tell you why I believe when. I believe that this man, and I'm just believing this because what I'm about to show you, he frauded her. He led her to believe that he had the power of attorney. So if he's a trustee, okay, of a section of land, then he has the power to speak for all of the majority of that section of land. Okay? So he was leading her to believe that he has the authority to sell his and his siblings' shares of land. And technically they're not shares of land, they're individual parcels because they have an APN number, which means an individual lot number that the county assigns for individual. See right here is where they're currently living on the land, and so they have a right to protect their land. Actually, he's a fugitive. Like, I don't even know where he is. Like, I'm assuming this is theirs because they were here, but he's got charges on him, so he's, I guess, is wanted because of, I think he was involved in some other issue and with federal charges that took place way before this ever happened. This is what the media is doing. They're blending in his charges and his activity with this property sale. And the problem with that is it doesn't matter what he has. It doesn't matter his legal troubles. It doesn't matter what he's done because she is her own person. Her family is her own people. And she bought the land, not him. Now, he may have part, like, managing, being a part of, like, managing the land, but that doesn't matter. They may be some kind of partners or something like that, but she and she alone is the sole owner of Olympic LLC. Okay, and so I'm going to show you the document. I'll get to it right here. Maybe in another video, but bear with me. So the point is they're doing all this trouble of wanting to show who he is. And that's what annoys me. It's like, okay, so you're going to hide behind a white guy with a felon as your ability to steal land from an Asian woman. I see her as a minority woman landowner that they're trying to rob. The city's trying to falsify having an easement. And these people demanding entitlement to trespass across the land just because they've been able to, just because they've been allowed and been given permission to cross the land, does not legally create an easement. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm a landowner and I have several parcels, and I may have somebody trespassing across my property right now and creating trails across my property, and I may not know about it. But that doesn't mean that just because I go up and suddenly put up a fence that they're going to say, oh no, we've been using this for a minute now, and so we got an easement. No, honey, you don't. And I'm going to put a fence up and I'm going to keep you off my land. And I don't care where it is you're trying to go. Right? But I mean, it's just silly. That's not how easements work, and especially in the state of California. Now, I want you to see this right here. See this right here? So, this is an APN, and what that is in California, that is a parcel number, meaning this is not one big chunk of land. So, they're trying to say she owns 1/24th or 4% of a property. No, she owns 100% of, at the very minimum, one part of 4 parts or whatever. But this is what happened. This is why I personally think that there was an attachment. So here's what happened. This guy named Nagy, Paul, we'll just call him Paul. Paul lives in North Carolina, and Wynn lives in California. So she's signing under her company, LLC, okay? And so Paul has to use a notary republic in North Carolina, and she has to use a notary republic in California. So let's talk about how this works. If you've got a parcel of land or parcels of land being sold in California, but you've got someone in another state, how does that work and what laws govern? And here's the evidence that will prove who's lying. And it's going to be proven who's lying, okay? Because under North Carolina laws for notary republic are much more lax. So it's not a public record, and there's no, you have to publicly record this. You don't have to like take thumbprints and all this stuff. So Paul, okay, so the person who fills out this form, okay, wrote this right here, saying Paul Nagy as his sole, a married man as his sole, and then boom, it's an unfinished sentence, guys. Because look, it says attachment right here. So that tells me that because there's a bridge there and there's an unfinished sentence, it tells me that they're expecting the rest of that to be discussed in the attachment. And forensic examiners will clarify this on whether they're going to determine whether or not this is a valid document. In addition to the logs, I want you to know there is log laws for notary republics. What that means is in North Carolina, the person who took this document right here would have seen this, and she would have verified, okay, this is Paul. Here, I've seen his ID, and this is a notarized document. They're not showing everything in this, but I've seen this whole document. This is a notarized document. Of course, it has to be notarized. That's the law. So the notary in North Carolina would have a log of exactly what type of document is being notarized, and if there's an attachment, it has to be present, meaning that second page attachment, which is shown later in the video, that would have to be present for the notary to see. Because if the attachment's not there, she could not notarize it. Otherwise, it would be official misconduct. So then she signs or whatever, and then it goes to California. Okay, so this is a valid notarized document. Okay, so then they have to get their document, have a notary or whatever. So they can subpoena that log of that notary, and it will show 2 pages. Because if there's more than 1 page that is a reference to a document, 1, they have to make sure that that's initialed by the person, and 2, they have to document how many pages are in a document that's involved. So if it only says 1 page, or it may say 1 page with attachment, something like that, they have to annotate per the state law. Okay, and I can show you exactly. I've researched it and I've looked it up exactly what that state statute is. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and show you that, right? It's in here. The actual government. So this is the government code that would require the notary to log the character of the document if the North Carolina Carolina notary logged a 1-page deed and the California notary logged a 2-page deed, then that would be literal proof of forgery. Now keep in mind, she's not been charged with fraud. They've had enough time to know. They know about the notary logs. They know. So why isn't she charged? Because they know. That's why I really feel like there's some oppression going on here. And I could be wrong, but I'm just looking at things for what they are. Okay, so I'm going to show you the actual North Carolina logging laws. Okay. North Carolina loose certificate rule. So if in California, a notary does not typically call or verify an out-of-state notary, but the North Carolina notary would be documenting how many pages there are. Okay? And so let's talk about how under California Civil Code, what she owns. This is what I said. If Nike frauded her to believe she was getting 4 shares and only sold his legally, does it void the whole deal under California law or just the sibling parts? No. She will still own even if they only sold his. But if there is an agreement that says that he has to have the majority share of all of his family or the people who own that section of land, then it wouldn't even be binding. But there's nobody showing that document. That's what I'm concerned about. It's like, what? Okay, the media is going all the way out of the way to show this guy's a felon, this guy's a felon, and it's all they want to talk about is his felon, his felon, his felon, his felon, and he doesn't even own the land. She has been charged, by the way, the DA who is defending the city's access to this land is the same one who's pursuing charges on her, claiming there was a gun in the front seat and he was in the back seat. And so technically, if she knows he's a felon, then she cannot have that gun in a manner that he could have access to it. That's how the possession law works in California. He doesn't even have to have actual possession of it. He doesn't have to have storage of it. He doesn't have to have it in his hands. If he is near it to where he can access it, then the person who owns a gun can be charged, and it's a misdemeanor. So she's been charged with a misdemeanor for having a gun too close to him that he could access. That's what they're saying. He was in the back seat and she had a gun in the front seat, and so therefore she was charged. To me, it seems like they're just taking into her because they want that land, right? And so they're trying to take over this land and claim an easement that doesn't exist. Then I'm going to go into that law. So the whole... Okay, so in California real estate, if you see these 3 APA numbers, which I've showed you the APN numbers, there's 3 parcel numbers on a single grant deed, is a major indicator that the transaction involved multiple separate parcels of land, not just one undivided field. So an APN is a unique ID assigned by the county assessor to a specific piece of taxable land. So those 3 numbers change the entire legal merits of the case. The section land proof. If the deed lists 3 distinct APNs, it confirms your theory that the 7-acre property was already legally subdivided into smaller sections. The conflict the city is suggesting, okay, even though they put legal verbiage in there that they technically could not be treated like because they know she's going to go after them. They don't know how much money she has, okay, because some of the stuff she's doing looks like it's going pro se. But the letter shows that they're trying to protect themselves because they're taking over a land, right? And they're saying, we believe we have a right of way. So we're going to remove this fence because some of it is, it's approaching on the, blocking an access way, a public access way. Now, I don't know if that was the front of the fence because they're saying that, no, you put your fence out too far. You went beyond the property line. But it sounds to me like they're trying to act like it's the public access to the beach because a lot of people are mad because they've been used to using these trails. And I was like, well, you know what? If you've had a beta LED to shortcut across a field that doesn't mean you actually legally have a right. It just means that you've had been blessed with permission. But when a property owner comes in and decides to put up a fence, unless you have an actual valid legal easement, oh well. And it's just the people treating her like this is just so egregious. Give us access to your property. Like, and then this guy goes before the city and starts dragging in the indigenous people. Dude, that's what really annoyed me. It's like, don't drag in the Indians and talk about, and he's talking about none of you people are indigenous. I'm like, first of all, you guys are trying to steal land from an Asian woman and hiding behind a white dude with a felon, right? You're stealing land from an Asian woman and trying to drag the Indians into that. I, as a person with a fourth great grandmother who was crossed the Trail of Tears and was forced off her land, my whole family are tribal members. And it's just like, you know, I got out of the tribal membership. I was a tribal member, and I left my tribal membership because there's so much disgusting politics when it comes to how they treat tribal people, and I'm just really annoyed that people are trying to drag the Indians into this. It's like, first of all, this is private land. It is literally owned by private people, and and if they wanted to give an easement to the city, why didn't they? You see what I'm saying? Just because people created trails across their land doesn't actually mean that they intended to give them a permanent easement. Now, maybe in some states, based on the statutes, maybe that would have actually created an implied easement. But in the state of California, that's not how it works. So, no, there is no easement. And these people are being abusive to an Asian woman and, acting like she doesn't have a right to put up a fence. Now, granted, she didn't do it right. If she didn't get that permit, and it is legally required to get a permit, then she didn't do it right. But to just hate on this Asian woman and then try to hide behind who she's associated with, that's ridiculous. Okay? It's ridiculous. Anyways, so in California and North Carolina, a married man often needs his spouse to sign a quitclaim or spousal waiver if they're selling community property. If attachment A contains his wife's signature or information about her waiver, it proves the attachment was a legal necessity for the sale, not a forgery added by the buyer. Okay? So your bigger picture is now very clear. The city is ignoring a technically sound deed with a clear referential bridge to an attachment. They're using his felon status, which he's not even the owner of the land. She is. She's just associated with him, and he's like doing some things to manage to help. I think he was like, she's using him as kind of like, because he's this big dude and she's, a woman, and these guys are like ganging up on her. And so he's going in there and he's helping her, putting up this fence, and so they're using his felon status to trick the public into thinking a standard real estate attachment is a criminal fraud. When should file a motion to admit the original deed and point specifically to the hanging sentence, she should ask the judge, why would he sign a sentence that doesn't end? He signed it because he was looking at the attachment that finished it, right? So, but not only that, let's talk about the fact that I believe he had power of attorney, because here's why. Here's why I believe this. Because, like it said right here, absent a power of attorney, no notary republic can sign and notarize a document that gives away rights of other people, to include his spouse, unless she knew he had the authority. So let's verify this, okay? Because that would be official misconduct, okay? Okay. So he is married. In both North Carolina and California, a notary has strict legal duty to verify that the person signing actually has authority to sign for others. Okay?
So if Paul Nagy signed for his wife and siblings, the notary was required to see written proof of that power. Okay. Does she have to document that, like whatever it is he presented? Okay. But she has to verify that. You go ahead and go try to sign for your spouse. Yeah, I want to sign I'm going to sell my property here. I'm a married person and sell my property. And go see what the notary says. Or even call a notary and ask him about that. Just saying. So signing for a spouse, the wife's right, because North Carolina is a dower marital interest state and California is a community property state, a husband cannot typically sell his land without his wife's signature. Oh, we're not in the age of suffering. Suffrage, women's suffrage, guys. Okay, just saying. We're not there, y'all. But they're trying to act like we are. We're not, I promise. Anyways, without his wife's signature or a formal power of attorney. So the notary's duty, if Nagy signed his wife's name or signing for both of them, the notary was required by NCGS section 10B-20 to verify a recorded power of attorney. So the hanging sentence, if the deed starts with Paul Nagy, a married man, and then drops off to see attachment A, you notice likely contain the spousal waiver or the power of attorney, but basically it is the one saying I'm selling this, 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 and this. And then signed but it signed his initials. However, it did not signing as power of attorney that I can see. But we don't know everything. We're having a lot of things being hidden from us. So it may have been, here I'm representing this person. I don't know. So we'll look into that. So if the notary logged this as a multi-page act, it proves the wife's interest was legally addressed. When someone signs for others, they're signing in a representative capacity. He said as married person, and then on the attachment for the portion that they let us see, keep in mind, you're not seeing everything. It shows the names and the specific portions that is being sold. So a notary must be satisfied that the person has the authority to sign. They usually do this by reviewing a trust agreement or a power of attorney. So the notary log. So if the notary logged the act as Paul Nagy individually and as attorney in fact for siblings, then the notary saw the proof. But here's the issue, the silence. The fact that the city and the DA are silent on the notary log suggests they don't want to admit the notary likely saw the legal proof of authority and Wynn is the victim of fraud and they are trying to steal her land instead of defending her and prosecuting him for taking his, you know what I'm saying, lying to so if it's proven that the notary has documented these appropriate things, then one, they should be charging Nagy with lying to police and saying that he didn't sell on their behalf or that he doesn't even have power to. Okay, they're just acting like the media is going to handle this and that these people are not going to have the ability to have attorneys represent them and they're going to drown him in charges. They're going to drown her in charges and they're just, that's what it looks like is going on to me. And I just look at this like, okay, if y'all go steal an Asian woman's land and hide behind a white man and just talk about his felon and then bring in the Indians while you're stealing an Asian woman's land, I'm just like, what are they doing to the poor people and the minorities in this area? Like, that's what I'm thinking. I'm trying to see the bigger picture, y'all. So the 2 pages in the fraud, this is your smoking gun again. If the seller presented a power of attorney to the notary logged it, then the siblings are lying when they say they had no authority, and they're also lying to authority. If the C attached was the bridge to the power of attorney or the sibling shares and the notary verified it, then the buyer Wynn is a victim of government land grab, not a forger. Okay? So, why the North Carolina notary is the key. If the North Carolina notary confirms they saw a power of attorney or trust document, the forgery narrative dies. The city is using the proposed order, which isn't signed, to ignore the Notarial Act, which is a sworn government record. The bottom line, a notary cannot legally let a man sign his wife's name just because he says so. If the seal is on the deed, the law presumes the notary verified the authority. By tearing down the fence, the city ignored a presumptively valid notarized deed. Okay, but now technically they had a right to tear it down because they didn't get a permit. So, but for that reason only, they can't write a public statement that it appears there's a public right of way, because that technically they're coming right out and saying we have the right of way or we think we have the right of way. If you imply that you have a right of way or that they're technically still slandering the title of their land. Okay, so let's talk about what has to be when you sign for power. I have personally signed for a power of attorney before, and I always, whether I know the statute requires it, I'm going to put it under there, signing as power of attorney, because that's just what you should do. But let's talk about North Carolina law. So, does North Carolina law require a person? Now, keep in mind, I'm recovering from hand surgery, so person signing as POA to say when signing they are signing as POA. All right. I always want to see what the statute is. I don't want to hear what the media says. I don't want to hear what people say. I want to see the statutes. Okay. So in North Carolina, the answer is a definitive yes. Under North Carolina General Statute 10B 322 and Section 10B 43, when someone signs for another person, they are signing in a representative capacity. So for the deed to be legally valid and recordable, the signature must clearly state that relationship. So the proper way to sign as a POA. If he was signing for his wife or siblings using a power of attorney, he couldn't just sign Paul Nagy. He was legally required to sign his name, attorney in fact, or Paul Nagy as attorney in fact for a person's name. And so the notary certificate, the proof, the notary's acknowledgement at the bottom of the deed must also match those. So the specific form under North Carolina General Statute 10B 43, the notary must use a specific representative capacity certificate. So the verification, the notary must state in writing, I certify that Paul Nagy personally appeared before me and acknowledged to me that he signed the foregoing instrument in capacity indicated. Okay. So the hanging sentence, if the deed cuts off after Paul Nagy, a married man, but see, here's the problem is, if he's signing the words a married man, that means he's signing for his wife. Okay? And that in itself is a problem with that notary republic, because he's signing away his wife's property rights. And that's not even legal. Okay? If there wasn't some kind of verification. That's why I'm saying there's stuff missing here, guys. It likely led to a signature block on the next page, attachment A, that listed these representative capacities. The Hatted-A, okay, so I talked about this whole, the Hatted-A reference here is because I was looking at specific markers on, yes, I do believe that that initials on the attachment was absolutely 100% Paul's. I believe that because of there are what I call straggler marks. This is what this is referenced to. This is the word that I coined, but there are other things. So I have studied graphology. I am not a certified graphologist, okay? But they need to have a graphologist involved. But really and truly, all they really need to do is get with that notary republic. And I believe they already have. I think they have had enough time now to have already subpoenaed her or have the law enforcement subpoena her logs. And there's either official misconduct going on with a notary republic, but the fact that he is signing one for his wife tells you that he has to have the ability to do that, and that's official misconduct, and that's fraud. If a notary republic is allowing a man to sign as a married person and not even include his wife, then he has to have some kind of authority document that he can sign for her and other siblings. Otherwise, that in itself is fraud, because he didn't have verification. I mean, I've showed you the law. He can't do that, and neither can the notary. So either way, Wynn is a victim, because she can't even own his parcel if he didn't legally have a right to sign for his wife under North Carolina law. So if the signature block on attachment A shows his wife and siblings' names written out with his representative signature next to them, and they're not showing the whole document, that's what bothers me. It's like, why are you guys hiding stuff? Okay? Why are you doing that? You're hiding the statutes that says what California law easements actually are, and you're lying to the public to encourage them to do criminal trespass, because if they don't actually have an easement, it is technically criminal trespass, and they can sue them, anybody, for going across their land. And it doesn't matter what the city is saying. That's not going to matter. If they take them to federal court and like put a whole bunch of people being sued and the city being sued for unconstitutional taking, that's where I think this belongs, is in federal court. Like but it's extremely more expensive to take stuff to federal court. But if she's going to pro se stuff, she needs to pro se her own way on up to the federal court, right? But anyway, so there was a particular A that was written, okay, the hatted A or straggle marks. But honestly, it doesn't matter who drafted it. It matters who signed it, and he himself admitted that he signed it. He himself said he was frustrated and angry with his family because they wouldn't sell, and he was trying to encourage the rest of them to sell, and he said he wanted to wash his hands of it, and he felt like the city was going to do an eminent domain, which tells me that it didn't have a right of way. Okay, he just wanted to be done with it. And but he also said, by the way, he said that their family is, I don't think he used the word delusional, but he said, I think he used the word fantasy. He says it's their fantasy that he, meaning this Luke guy, was in any way aggressive or being a bully, as the media was trying to make him out to be. He says that didn't happen at all. I sold him my land. Now, then he said, and I think that I think he was either I think he was afraid that other people were angry at him, or he's just basically trying to, like, basically go back on the deal, or maybe he was afraid of fraud. Because if there was an actual agreement that nobody can sell any portion of the land without all the majority agreeing, then he knows that he committed fraud. But he's acting like he doesn't care what anybody says, meaning Paul. He says, I absolutely had a right to sell at least this portion, my portion of the land, meaning him and his wife. So under North Carolina, unless there was something like an agreement before they got married that this is going to, you're not going to have a right to this property, then, they call those prenups, then he can't sell that land. Okay. But it depends. But it sounds like, when he puts the words, I, a married person, a married man. Okay. Let's go back to that right there. I, Paul Nagy. This is for valuable consideration. Now he signed this right here because this was marked out. So he went ahead. This was initialed. That was him. It says a married man. Okay. This is him signing this. Now see this letter right here. Okay. He said he agreed he signed this. Okay. A married man as his sole. And then it says attachment A. And that's it. There's no more space to put anything there. So in order for him to have signed this, he would have had to read it. And you would have had to have accepted that there was an attachment A. Because otherwise this sentence doesn't make any sense. Look, Paul Nagy, a married man, as his sole blank, and then just see attachment A, basically. There's an unfinished sentence. It means there was an attachment. So it's really hard for me to accept someone saying, oh, I didn't know about the attachment. That was added later. Dude, you literally have an unfinished sentence right here and your signature underneath it, which is right here. And by the way, speaking of his signature, he combines both print and cursive in his writings. And I totally believe 100% that his initial is on that attachment. Now, here's the thing. Let's say that the notary in North Carolina did in fact document that there was a second page attachment. If they're not required by law to keep a copy of that, what they're notarying, which I don't believe they are, then they could have added a different attachment later. Okay? But this is a problematic transaction because a notary republic is saying a married person, and then she would have to have proof, absolute proof that, he did in fact have some kind of authorization. And look right here, these individual parcel lots, okay, individual parcel lots means individual owners. And so unless and until the media, who's supposed to be biased and neutral, until they show that document where they argued that basically he can't, they're saying that basically he couldn't buy this property, and they're saying that he always he And it's not even him that owns the land. It's her. And it's sad that they're doing this to an Asian woman, and she doesn't even get like represented like at all as the victim. They're just like trying to make her out to be this land thief, because she's associated to this guy who happens to be a felon and he's facing other charges. And, you know, even if he was, and they do successfully, convict him or whatever, it doesn't matter. He still has a right to own property. So they go into all this about this is, see what I'm saying? Why does any of this doesn't, okay, so they're saying, okay, well, this is his charges for his company. So he has his own company, right? And so he gets involved with her, and all of a sudden it's all about him. Like, she's not a real owner of a company. Okay, she is an owner of a company. It's called Olympic LLC. Her name is Yutong Wen, and she put this sign out there. And she was really angry because people were going in there. They were tearing down the fence that she paid for and cutting it. And, I felt like the reporter was extremely rude. He goes up there, "Well, you're going to shoot me if I cut your fence?" And so guy was out there. The guy, I don't know if he was the one that went to city council. He was like, "You guys, there's none of you people are indigenous. And what about the indigenous land, argument?" I'm like, first of all, this land has nothing to do with the Indians, so don't be dragging the Indians into this. This land has to do with an Asian woman being discriminated against because she's an Asian woman who owns land that they want to take and act like they have an easement when they don't. And not even give her any money. They don't even want to compensate her for taking of her land. If the city wants to come in and do eminent domain, they have to pay the owners, and it will be documented that a sale was made for eminent domain for any public right-of-way that they forced, and compensation would have to begin, because guess what? If they don't, it's called an unconstitutional taking of the land. And the fact they're doing to a woman who's a minority and trying to drag the Indians into it is not okay. And so I just want people, if you're going to make comments about this case, all I ask is respectfully, please ask them to show the notary log. And that DA in that county, people should be calling him like, "Yo, hello, why are you not contacting North Carolina Notary Republic and asking where the log is?" Because obviously the dude is presenting himself as having authority to sign for his wife. Under North Carolina law, that ain't even allowed unless you got some sort of authority. Where's the document? Where's the log? Now, she will get it. When continuing her lawsuits, she can subpoena the North Carolina state and get that notary log and subpoena that. And if this notary republic notarized that document, and that man didn't have any authority to be signing even for his wife under North Carolina law, if that's the case, then she committed official misconduct. And either way around it, Wynn is still a victim. Okay. So anyways, that's it for this one. I'm just saying, ask them, where's the notary log? Because that's what's going to boil down to. What's the log say? Was there 2 pages? Was it an attachment? Because it sure looks like there was an attachment to me. Well, look at the sentence, guys. I mean, how dumb can somebody be? Like, look at the sentence. All they want to talk about is that he's going to felon. He's a felon. I don't care if he's a felon. He ain't even the owner. I don't care what he's doing. I want to know about her. I want to know about her company. I want to know about the documents. I want to know how it went down. And I don't want to see this stuff. Like, I don't want to see what they're doing in court. What they're presenting is only the criminal acts on him, which doesn't matter in this case because he didn't buy the land. I don't want to see what they're claiming that about the fence in court, what they're claiming that there has to be an agreement. If they only had an oral agreement, then nobody would sell anything unless a majority agree. You know what? In the state of California, they don't mean squat. And them lawyers know that. If there's not an actual agreement written and recorded and set, or notarized, and it says, okay, here's the deal, guys. Nobody can sell the property without everybody majority agreeing. All the majority has to agree. If that's not in writing, it's not valid. Now, there was a proposed order that was wanting the court to rule that sale's not valid. Well, apparently that didn't go down because they still claiming it's their land. And the media is acting like it was confirmed in court that there was an agreement, and that's a lie. The media is lying, and they're hiding the notary log laws. And the DA, I'm telling you right now, if they had added that document, that DA would already have the evidence that somebody added something because of the way the log laws are. And they didn't charge her. And y'all know why. Because the DA knows they lying. The only person that should be charged is fraud. Unless. Okay, guys, that is it. Thank you for stopping in. And, yeah, I think it's sad. I think they robbed this. I think they're just really mistreating this woman. You know, I think that the family members who didn't want to sell, I think, to include also they are victims, because if Paul didn't have authority to sell for them and he presented that he did, if that's the case, then they are victims. Because a lot of times, there are families that give trustee positions, and um, it's very problematic. I really believe that there's things missing regarding the notary. They're not showing all the documents, and if somebody signed as representative, there would have been some kind of certificate that they're signing for that, or somewhere that they signed for that in that capacity, because North Carolina notary, it's clear that he signed it with the words as a married man. He's married. So why, and maybe there's more information of it that would explain why he is signing as a married man without his wife's signature. But they're presenting that Paul Nagy, meaning the media, is presenting that Paul Nagy, they're acting like he didn't sign, he didn't initial that attachment. Okay, well, first of all, let's go back to the first page where he's signing as a married man. Where's his wife's signature? Under North Carolina law, because there's two states here involved, so there's two state laws regarding this sale. Okay. Anyways, y'all have a good one.